In this video, we will continue with The Book of Life by Upton Sinclair, published in 1921 from the Payne Company in Chicago. Welcome to Fortune Forecasts. I am Daisy, your hostess, and we're heading into now part 3, which is The Book of Love. If you would like to just get into the chapter, please go to the description and click on the timestamp. Otherwise, hang out here for a minute with me as I go through my narrator's comments. Well, for me, I could tell you the author and I maybe don't agree so much, but it could be a few things. Could be that this is 2023 and I am time warping to 1921, or could be that that is a man's perspective and I, being a woman, feel a little bit different, and being a woman in this new century. Being that I myself was what I would call a victim of parents that had a different culture, and I was married young at the age of 18 to somebody that was much older, and I endured it for 10 years. Would things have been different had I been a little bit older? I don't know. Would I change things? I would not, because during those 10 years, I grew up and I learned a lot, which has made me appreciate my marriage now of 30 years with my current husband. But I could say one thing: I believe in love. And what is love? It's still a mystery. It can take you by storm. Do you know if it's love or do you know if it's lust? What is it that drives you? How would you know? I want to believe in the love of the poets and the dreamers, and that kind of love that perseveres through all the hardships, and when you can look into that person's eyes and just fall in love with them over and over and over again, because you're not just in love with the physical, you're in love with every part of their being. Then we have Upton Sinclair in these last 2 chapters, both titled Early Marriage and then The Marriage Club. Whoa, I think he lost me there for a little bit. But before I get started on the next chapter, I did agree with what he said when he was talking about that we really need to understand what marriage means. And I have come to understand that aside all that beautiful stuff and all that magic, in our times, marriage is also a business partnership. I mean, think about it. You get a license to get married, and that offers you a license for partnerships and being involved in business and purchasing things together as well. Most of all, I do agree with what the author said. Marriage offers the deepest and best of all friendships, which will lead me into Chapter 42, Education for Marriage. Maintains that the art of love can be taught and that we have the right and the duty to teach it. I assume now that our young couple have definitely made up their minds and that the wedding day is near. They are therefore, both the man and the woman, in position to receive information as to the physical aspects of their future experience. This information is now for the most part possessed only by pathologists who impart it too late after people have blundered and wrecked their lives. The opponents of birth control ask in horror if you would teach it to the young. I am now able to answer just when I would teach it. I would teach it to these young couples about to marry. I would make it by law compulsory for every young couple to attend a school of marriage and to learn not merely the regulation of conception, but the whole art of health and happiness in sex. Perhaps the words "a school of marriage" strike you as funny. When I was young, I remember that Pulitzer founded a school of journalism, and all newspaper editors made merry. They knew that journalism could only be learned in practice. But nowadays, every city editor gives preference to an applicant who has taken a college course in reporting. They have learned that journalism can be taught, just like engineering and accounting. In the same way, I assert that marriage can be taught, and the art of love, physical, mental, moral, and even financial. I think that the day will come when enlightened parents would no more dream of trusting their tender young daughter to a man who had not taken a course in sex than they would go up in an airplane with a pilot who knew nothing about an engine. The knowledge which I possess upon the art of love, I would be glad to give you in this book. But unfortunately, if I were to do so, my book would be suppressed and I should be sent to jail. Some 10 or 12 years ago, I received a pitiful letter from a man who was in state's prison in Delaware, charged with having imparted information as to birth control. Under our amiable legal system, a perfectly innocent man may be thrown into jail and kept there for a year or two before he is tried. And if he is without money or friends, he might as well be buried alive. I went to Wilmington to call on the United States attorney who caused the indictment in this case and had an illuminating conversation with him. The official was anxious to justify what he had done. He assured me that he was no bigot, but on the contrary, an extremely liberal man, a Unitarian, a progressive, etc. But Mr. Sinclair, he said, I assure you this prisoner is not a reformer or humanitarian or anything like that. He is a depraved person. Look, here is something we found in his trunk when we arrested him. A pamphlet explaining about sex relations. See this paragraph? It says that the pleasure of intercourse is increased if it is prolonged. I looked at the pamphlet and then I looked at the attorney. Do you think you have stated the matter quite fairly? I asked. Apparently the purpose is to explain that the emotions of women are more slow to be aroused than those of men, and that husbands failing to realize this often do not gratify their wives. Well, said the other, do you consider that a subject to be discussed? Pardon me if I discuss it just a moment, I replied. Do you happen to know whether the statement is a fact? No, I don't. It may be, I suppose. You have never investigated the matter? The legal representative of our government was evidently annoyed by my persistence. I have not, he answered. But then, suppose I were to tell you that thousands of homes have been broken up for lack of just that bit of knowledge, that tens of thousands of marriages are miserable for lack of it. Surely, Mr. Sinclair, you exaggerate. Not at all. I could prove to you by one medical authority after another that if the desire of a woman in marriage is roused and then left ungratified, the result is a nervous strain, and in the long run, it may be nervous breakdown. The above covers only one detail of the pamphlet in question. I read some pages of it and argued them out with the attorney. It was a perfectly simple, straightforward exposition of facts about the physiology of sex, and one of the reasons a man was to be sent to jail for several years was, not that he had circulated such a pamphlet, not that he had showed it to young people, but merely that he had it in his trunk. There is an honest and very useful book written by an English physician, Dr. Marie C. Stopes, entitled Married Love, published by Dr. William J. Robinson of New York, a specialist of authority and integrity. The book deals with just such vital facts in a perfectly dignified and straightforward manner. Yet Dr. Robinson has been hounded by the Post Office Department because of it. He was convinced and forced to pay a fine of $250, and the book was barred from the mails. I have so much else of importance to say in this book of love that it would not be sensible to jeopardize it by causing a controversy with our official censors of knowledge. Therefore, I will merely say in general terms that men and women differ not merely as a sex, but as individuals, and every marriage is a separate problem. Every couple has to solve it in the intimacy of their love life, and for this there are needed, first of all, gentleness on the part of the man, especially in the first days of the honeymoon, and on the part of both at all times consideration for the other's welfare and enjoyment, and above all, frankness and honesty in talking out the subject. Reticence and shyness may be virtues elsewhere, but they have no place in the intimacies of the sex life. If men and women will only ask and answer frankly, they can find out by experience what makes the other happy and what causes pain. We are dealing here with the most sacred intimacy of life and one of the most vital of life's problems. It is here, in the marriage bed, that the divorce problem is to be settled, and likewise the problem of prostitution, for it is when men and women fail to understand each other and to gratify each other that one or the other turns cold and indifferent, perhaps angry and hateful, and then we have passion unsatisfied, and ranging the world, breaking up other homes and spreading disease. So I would say to every young couple, seek knowledge on this subject. Seek it without shame from others who have had a chance to acquire it. Seek it also from nature, our wise old mother who knows so much about her children. Be natural, be simple and straightforward, and beware of fool nations about sex. If you will look in the Code of Hammurabi, which is over 4,000 years old, you'll see the provision that a man who has intercourse with a menstruating woman shall be killed. In Leviticus, you will read that both the man and the woman are to be cast out from their people. You will find that most people still have some such notion, which is without any basis whatever in health. And this is only one illustration of many I might give of ignorance and superstition in the sex life. I would give this as one very good rule to bear in mind. Your love life exists for the happiness and health of yourself and your partner, and not for Hammurabi, nor Moses, nor Jehovah, nor your mother-in-law, nor anybody else on the earth or above it. Great numbers of people believe that women are naturally less passionate than men, and that marital happiness depends upon men's recognizing this. Of course, there are defective individuals, both men and women, but the normal woman is every bit as passionate as a man, if once she has been taught. And if love is given its proper place in life, and monkish notions not allowed to interfere, she will remain so all through life, in spite of childbearing or anything else. I say to married couples that they should devote themselves to making and preserving passionate gratification in love, because this is the bright jewel in the crown of marriage, and if lovers solve this problem, they will find other problems comparatively simple. End of chapter 42. If you could be kind, hit that like button. Stay here with me on this video as I flip the page to chapter 43, the money side of marriage. Deals with the practical side of the life partnership of matrimony. So far, we have discussed marriage as if it is consisted only of love, but it is manifest that this is not the case. Marriage is everyday companionship, and also it is partnership in a complicated business. In our School of Marriage, therefore, we shall teach the rights and duties of both partners to the contract, and shall face frankly the money side of the enterprise. One of the first facts we must get clear is that the economics of marriage are in most part of the world still based upon the subjection of women, and are therefore incompatible with the claims of women as a partner and comrade. They will never be right until the social revolution has abolished privilege and the state has granted to every woman a maternity endowment with a mother's pension for every child during the entire period of the rearing and education of that child. Until this is done, the average woman must look to some man for the support of her child, and that, by the automatic operation of economic force, makes her subject to the whims of the man. What women have to do is to agitate for a revision of the property laws of marriage, and meantime to see that in every marriage there is an extra legal understanding which grants to the woman the equality which laws and conventions deny her. When I was a boy, my mother had a woman friend who, if she wanted to go downtown, would borrow a quarter from my mother. This woman's husband was earning a generous salary, enough to enable him to buy the best cigars by the box, and to keep a supply of liquors always on hand. But he gave his wife no allowance, and if she wanted pocket money, she had to ask him for it, each time a separate favor. Yet this woman was keeping a home. She was doing just as hard work and just as necessary work as the man. Manifestly, this was a preposterous arrangement. If a woman is going to be a homemaker for a husband, it is simple, common sense proposition that the salary of the husband shall be divided into 3 parts. First, the part which goes to the home, the benefit of which is shared in common. Second, the part which the husband has for his own use. And third, the part which the wife has for hers. The second and third parts should be equal, and the wife should have hers, not as a favor, but as a right. If the two are making a homestead or running a farm or building up a business, then half the proceeds should be the woman's, and it should be legally in her name. And this is a matter of course, as any other business contract. If the woman does not make a home, but merely displays fine clothes at tea parties, that is of course another matter. Just what she is to do is something that had better be determined before marriage. And if a man wants a life partner to take an interest in his work or to have a useful work of her own, he had better choose that kind of woman, and not merely one that has a pretty face and a trim ankle. The business side of marriage is something that has to be talked about from time to time. There have to be meetings of the board of directors, and at these meetings there ought to be courtesy and kindness, but also plain facts and common sense, and no shirking of issues. Love is such a very precious thing that any man or woman ought to be willing to make money sacrifices to preserve it. But on the other hand, it is a fact that there are some people with whom you cannot be generous. The more you give them, the more they take. And with such people, the only safe rule is exact justice. Let married couples decide exactly what contribution each makes to the family life, and what share of money and authority each is entitled to. I might spend several chapters discussing the various rocks on which I have seen marriages go to wreck. For example, extravagance and worldly show, clothes for women. In Paris is a demi-monde, a world of brutal lust combined with riotous luxury. The women of this half-world are in touch with the world of art and fashion, and when the rich customers and women decorators want what they call ideas, it is to these lust women they go. The fashions they design are always depraved, of course, always for the flaunting of sex, never for the suggestion of dignity and grave intelligence. At several seasons of the year, these lust women are decked out and paraded at the race courses and other gathering places of the rich, and their pictures are published in the papers and spread over all the world. So forthwith it becomes necessary for your wife in Oshkosh or Kalamazoo to throw away all the perfectly good clothes she owns and get a complete new outfit, because they are wearing something different. Of course, the costume makers have seen that it is extremely different, so as to make it impossible for your wife and children to be happy in their last season's clothes. I have a winter overcoat, which I brought 14 years ago, and as it is still as good as new, I expect to use it another 14 years, which will mean that it has cost me $1.50 per year. But think what it would have cost me if I had considered it necessary each year to have an overcoat cut as the keepers of French mistresses were cutting theirs. But then, suppose you put it up to your wife and daughters to wear sensible clothes, and they do so, and then they observe that on the street your eyes turn to follow the ladies in the latest disappearing skirt. The point is, you perceive that you yourself are partly to blame for the fashions. They appeal to a dirty little imp you have in your own heart, and when the decent women discover that, it makes them blazing hot, and that is one of the ways you may wreck your domestic happiness if you want to. Unless I am greatly mistaken, when the class war is all over, we're going to see in our world a sex war. But it is not going to be between the man and the woman. It is going to be between the mother woman and the mistress woman, and the mistress women are going to have their hides stripped off. Men wreck marriage because they are promiscuous, and women wreck it because they are parasites. Woman has been for long centuries an economic inferior, and she has the vices of the subject peoples and tribes. Now there are some who want to keep these vices, while at the same time claiming the new privileges which go with equality. Such a woman picks out a man who is sensitive and chivalrous. He knows that women suffer handicaps, pains of childbirth, physical weakness, and who therefore feels impelled to bear more than his share of the burdens. She makes him her slave, and by she gets a child, and then she has him, because he is bowed down with awe and worship. He thinks that such a miracle has never happened in the world before, and he spends the rest of his life waiting on her whims and nursing her vanities. I note that at the recent convention of the Women's Party, they demanded their rights and agreed to surrender their privileges. There you have the final test by which you may know that women really want to be free and are prepared to take the responsibilities of freedom. End of chapter 43. All right, I'll be at the next video. Please do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you like what you see or like what you hear, and meet me at the next video for chapter 44, The Defense of Monogamy.